Um, I was born in Vietnam in 1967, and life in Vietnam was pretty normal at the time. I went to school and came home one day. My dad had packed all of our belongings onto a bus, and he said that we were moving. I had no idea what was going on. So my mom and dad, my brothers and sisters and myself all boarded this bus, and we just traveled from town to town to town. We didn't really have a place to stay, so my parents would just ask people to take us in. And I remember we slept on the sidewalk, we stayed in people's homes, but my most memorable place was a chicken coop, because that's all the lady had to offer us was a chicken coop outside. The very last place that we stayed was a fishing village called Phuc Tinh. One day, my dad said, let's take the kids to the beach, let them have a little fun. And so we all went to the beach, and my little brother, Tu, spelled T-U, he was acting up, so my dad said, you know what, Tu, you go back and stay with Mom at this friend's house. And luckily he did, because as we were playing on the beach, swimming in the water, all of a sudden there was just chaos. We heard people screaming, you know, people running everywhere, and we just did not know what was going on, but my dad knew what was going on. He gathered all of us together, and at that moment, we saw my mom running towards us. She found us on the beach, thanks to my little brother, too, who knew where we were. We all grabbed our stuff and went directly to the harbor where all the boats were. Now, my dad didn't know a lot of people there, but he did have some friends, and but they had already taken off. We didn't know anyone there that owned a boat that we can get on. I remember us getting onto a boat, and my dad threw a piece of tarp over us to hide us. And at this time, there was a lot of gunfire, people screaming, kids crying. It was really terrifying at the time. And we were very hungry at this moment, because after a day of swimming, we were all starving. My mom said, okay, Trang, you and our nanny at the time, go back to the house and grab us something to eat. So she and I went back to the home. We grabbed some food, and we were trying to run back to the harbor at this time. There was just gunfire shooting everywhere. And I took off, and I left her behind. So I made it back to the harbor, found my family, and I was only 7 years old at this time. And so the owner of the boat that we were hiding on found us and told us to get off. So we got off, and luckily at that time, somebody on a boat noticed us and said, look, we can help you. So they had these little basket boats that they dropped into the water, and we just took turns sitting on this little basket boat, and they rowed us toward the bigger boat. And then we were on the boat for I don't know how many days. All of us got seasick. We were hungry, thirsty. All we had to drink was whatever rainwater we could gather. And my mom was really sick at the time. We'd never been on a boat before. So this was a very scary experience for all of us. We didn't know what we were going to do, where we would end up, but my dad, my mom, they did not want us to live under the communist regime. And they had to find a way to get us out when the war ended in Vietnam in 1975, and this was in April of 1975. So we were, floundering in the middle of the ocean, and one day we noticed a huge ship with a barge, and everybody started getting onto this barge. So my dad, tried to help my mom get on the barge, and here we are. I had my mom and dad. I have an older brother who's 9, myself, and my younger sister, Trang, and then a younger brother, 2, and a younger brother, 18 months old. And we all got onto this barge, and at the time, there must have been some barbed wiring around the barge, so my dad got a really deep cut on his foot. But there he was, trying to get people from our little boat onto this barge. And then we stayed on the barge, and my sister, Trang, at the time, was really, really sick. She had severe diarrhea, and we just didn't know what to do. While we were on this barge, they dropped these square baskets onto the barge and told each family to get on and to bring whatever you wanted to bring. Now, at this time, my dad didn't bring anything that would be considered valuable, like money and gold. He brought just his camera equipment and some photo albums because he thought that he could use that at least to start a new life somewhere. He was a photographer in Vietnam, and he ran a photography studio called Binh Minh. And the studio was the bottom floor, and then we lived at the top floor. So anyway, so here we are. We got pulled up onto this bigger ship, and then while we were on the ship, they gave us some food, but it was just dried rice with water that would puff up to eat. So my mom noticed that we were so hungry, and my younger sister was really sick, Trang. She was so sick. And my mom would go around begging people for some salt, whoever had salt. And then we would sit here with a little rice and dip it in the grains of salt, and it was so good. Then my sister got worse. My dad, with his really infected and deep-cut foot now, had to put her on his back and climb this ladder to go see the medical personnel on the ship. And, she was really, really sick. And my dad told her, he said, "You know what, Trang? If you don't get better, you see all those sharks down there swimming in the water? They throw dead people down there." And at that moment, Trang willed herself to get better. And she did. So we were on the ship for I don't know how many days. Then we, I guess, ended up at the Philippines at the time. It was a refugee camp, and that's where we stayed for a few days, and we stayed in, tents or whatever they had available at the time. And I remember that it was so hot, probably hotter than here in South Mississippi, that we didn't have any shoes to wear. So my dad would get pieces of cardboard and tie some strings so that we would have, flip-flops to wear, because that's all we had. And we would line up every day for food, for our meals, and they would give rations of whatever you needed, the supplies for the week for each family. And then we went from there to another refugee camp and another refugee camp. And then one day my dad said that we're going to be sponsored by a parish in Rockford, Illinois. And the parish, St. James Catholic Parish, decided to take us in. And we flew over to Rockford, Illinois, and we were taken in by the whole parish. And they helped my dad find a job as a photographer, and my mom took care of us. And we went to school, and they helped us get settled. So it was quite an experience there, because we came from a very hot, humid country and went right into Rockford, Illinois in the fall of 1975, so it was rather cold, our first experience with snow, and it was a tough adjustment for especially my dad. He was not used to the cold. He would always get sick, especially during the winter time. Then we lived there for 4 years, and he connected with some friends in New Orleans. And at the moment, he said, "You know what, my children are losing their culture and heritage." We were not speaking Vietnamese. We would understand what our parents were saying in Vietnamese, but we would reply in English. and there were not a lot of Vietnamese people around where we were. So he decided to move us all down to New Orleans, and we settled there in New Orleans in a community called Woodlawn. At the time, my mom and dad made sure that we kept our language and our culture, our heritage. So they enrolled us in Vietnamese classes, and we'd go to Vietnamese religious classes, and we would attend Vietnamese youth group organizations, and that's how we relearned the language. And it was, at the time, we went kicking and screaming, didn't want to do it. We're in America now, we're learning English, we're embracing a new life here in America. But looking back now, I thank my parents for forcing us to do that, because so many people from different backgrounds have come up to me and said, gosh, I wish I had learned how to speak my native tongue, or kept some of the the festivals and the activities that were so special. So anyway, so that's how I ended up in New Orleans, and I went to school there at Loyola University. I graduated from there, and then I got a job at WLOX in Biloxi, and that's how I came over to Biloxi, Mississippi. Yes, I still have my mom and my younger sister, Teresa. She was born in Rockford, Illinois. We named her Teresa, as American name, and they both are in Gretna right now. And then my dad passed away, sadly, 7 years ago. I have my older brother, Tuan. He owns Nine Tech Computer in Ocean Springs. And then I have a younger sister, Trang. She is now an executive host at the Beau Rivage. So then I have my younger brother, Tu. We call him the bad boy. He is now a federal judge in Memphis, Tennessee. My younger brother, Tuan, spelled T-O-A-N, he runs a medical clinic. His wife is a doctor. And then my younger sister, Teresa, she's in the medical field over there in New Orleans. And then my baby sister, a twin, she was born in New Orleans. She's now a pharmacist in Texas. My dad was a photographer, and we pretty much were born in front of the camera. He actually has a picture of me that he superimposed my picture onto a TV, and this was back in the 70s, so that was pretty innovative back then. And who knew that I was going to go into the media field? And I told my parents I wanted to become a television reporter. And at the time, I loved the English language. I loved being in front of the camera. I loved drama, doing theater and all that, whereas my brothers and sisters were more towards the medical, the health, and the engineering side of it. So I pursued something that eventually kind of connected me to my dad, because being in front of the camera, and he loved music, and he loved theater, so it brought us closer together. When I moved over here, I was considered an outsider because I was not originally from this area, but the people here have really embraced me. They have a very strong Vietnamese community here in East Biloxi, especially pre-Katrina. We have our church there, Vietnamese Martyrs Catholic Church. Next to it is the Buddhist temple, also Vietnamese Buddhist temple. I understand there's also a Vietnamese Baptist church that's moving to East Biloxi. And that's where a lot of us congregate when we have the Vietnamese festivals and we have the services and all the activities that involve the youth. It's really wonderful. And it is very nice when someone comes up to me and says, my son or daughter look up to you and want to be like you and want to go to college and have a career and pursue the American dream like me. Well, I started as a news producer at WLOX when I graduated from Loyola University in 1989. And then I worked there for 4 years and then went to Baton Rouge as a news producer there at WBRZ-TV. And then when I married my husband, who is from Biloxi, I moved back and then returned to WLOX and then went into reporting. and I focused on assignment education because I had children in school at the time. So I've been a reporter for 27 years, and I said, you know, maybe it's time to retire and do something with more normal hours so I can still be home with my 2 girls who are in high school now. And it's been wonderful because I'm now with the Harrison County School District. I'm the public relations specialist, the very first one. The school district has never had one before. God has really put me in a good place. I'm very blessed. When I tell my story, I just don't think about myself. I think about so many other Vietnamese families that have been through the same experience or have been through really traumatic times because a lot of them experienced worse than I did. You know, there was a lot going on that happened right after the war. Those who came in the 80s, they actually had to escape the country. So it was a very, very difficult time, and a lot of them have been through so much. But being here in South Mississippi, being able to be near people that went through the same experiences, have the same background, and can speak the same language, it's wonderful to be able to share that. And here in South Mississippi, we do have vibrant Vietnamese communities, and we do have so many activities that involve families, not just Vietnamese families, but families from across the Gulf Coast. When we have our Tet Festival or Harvest Moon Festival, which is coming up, we invite everybody to come out and sample the food, and then we have traditional dances, and we have children who can still speak the language. And my children still speak Vietnamese because we try to encourage that at home. So, and it's really helped them, especially, you know, with the careers that they're pursuing now, and being able to say, yes, I'm bilingual. That's a huge plus. Right now, the church, because that's where people tend to gather, especially on weekends. But, you know, we have a very, very active Vietnamese church, Vietnamese Martyrs Catholic Church. And we have so many activities that involve children. We have Vietnamese CCD classes where children, like my children, are learning religion, Catholic religion, through Vietnamese nuns. And then they have Vietnamese classes where they're learning to read and write and speak. And then we have, every weekend, we have a huge sale of Vietnamese cuisine. We have Vietnamese bánh mì and phở and all sorts of dishes that are sold through the church. So there's a lot going on. We have a lot of people from the Gulf Coast that come when they hear about the festival. They come just to enjoy it because we have the traditional music and the dances and you know, definitely the food that draws a lot of people. Yes, and you know what? I have to say I am so blessed every time I tell my story of how our family ended up in America. We never imagined that this is where we would find our second life. And my parents, the bravery, the courage, the sacrifices they went through to bring us to America. So we're very, very, very blessed to be here.